Welcome back to MyFinJourney. Today's guest is Ken Sher, an executive coach, a keynote speaker who helps leaders build stronger, more engaged, and more productive teams through one core principle: trust. Ken works with executives and high potential leaders who may know the technical side of the job but struggle with the human side: communication, relationships, engagement, accountability, and executive presence. His trust success model focuses on five key leadership elements, which he'll dive into more. For the MyFin Journey audience, this conversation matters because wealth and business growth aren't built alone. If you want to scale, if you want to build anything meaningful, you need people, and if your leadership breaks trust, performance eventually breaks with it. Ken, welcome to MyFin Journey.
Thank you, Mustafa. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
No, it's our pleasure. So, Ken, talk to us. Help us understand how you got to where you are and why trust is so important.
Yeah, well, I spent about 25 years at Johnson& Johnson. I was in various sales and marketing leadership roles. I led sales recruiting for the US, and then I led three different sales training and leadership development teams at different operating companies. And then the last one I was at, it was a great position, it was a global position, did some great traveling, and we did some good work. But I met a general manager who in our first meeting said to me, Ken, I've led two different training and development teams, and you will never live up to my expectations. So that was pretty tough first introduction to the new boss. And he proved himself right because he made my life miserable for a few months. Then I found myself out of work, looking for my next opportunity. I was fortunate to find three new roles while I was still in my fees. The last one at Bristol-Myers Squibb, but I, at that point, was done with corporate America. And then about 11 years ago, I started my coaching practice.
It's very powerful, Ken. Help us understand if you don't mind. It feels like you had a very strong pharmaceutical background. I, in another life, worked in the pharmaceutical industry as well in drug development. Help us understand, what you're doing today. Do you feel like it's a very big pivot from maybe that, pharmaceutical background? Or do you just feel like it's a natural growth or natural evolution?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like, anybody who's in any kind of career transition, anybody who's thinking of doing something different needs to kind of take inventory, a personal inventory, and think, so what have I done in the past? What do I like to do? What am I good at? What am I bad at or don't like to do? And figure out where you want to go. And based on my experience losing my job, I do some career coaching, helping people find their next opportunity. And then based on my leadership development experience, I do my executive coaching. So I was doing coaching at J&J and at Bristol-Myers, and I'm doing it now, but just doing it on my own in a different way.
Can help me understand, what do you mean by coaching? Because sometimes people don't know what they don't know. They think of
Mm.
mentorship and they think one thing. They think of coaching, maybe they think of the same thing as mentorship. Help me understand, when you talk about coaching, when you talk about it in the professional setting, whether at J&J or Bristol Myers or now with executives who are in theory very good at what they do.
Mhm.
Help me understand, what do you define coaching as and why is it valuable?
Well, I think it's extremely valuable because coaching is, it's first of all done with an objective observer. I have no skin in the game when I'm talking to somebody and working with them on some of their leadership skills. So my opinion is objective. It's not colored in perception of knowing that person in the past or knowing how they interact with others. The other thing I think what a coach does is really kind of reflects back to the client what the client is doing and what others might be seeing, and helps them to come up with ideas to improve their delivery or improve their performance in whatever way it needs to be. But the coach provides honest feedback. Sometimes the coach can be just a sounding board, and oftentimes giving advice and guidance as well.
And at what point do you think a coach is destructive, if at all?
Yeah, well, I think a coach is destructive when they say this is the way you have to do it, because I don't believe there's any one way to do most things. There's different ways, and one of the things I like to do with my clients is I want to make sure it's a personalized approach. So what might work for you, Mustafa, might not work for somebody else. Whether it's you need to be more direct, you need to be more assertive in what you're doing. Somebody else may be you might want to pull back a little bit and lighten up in your approach. So I think a coach can be destructive when they are overbearing and they're telling the person what to do as opposed to helping the client come up with the solutions with the guidance from the coach.
Understood. So for you, is it just helping the client on that journey of self-discovery and really polishing off his strengths or her strengths, or do you
Yeah.
see it as a bit as something different?
Well, I think it's a little of that. And often I get clients when a leader will come to me and say, this person's got high potential. There are just some things that are holding them back. Maybe it's blind spots, or maybe it's something that's very obvious and they want me to work with. So part of it is self discovery. Because if you're not self aware, if you don't know what it is you're doing that might be holding you back, or maybe even helping you, it's hard to continue on the right path. Once that discovery of, yeah, I guess I can be a little harsh sometimes in the way I deliver feedback, once that goes, then we start talking about why does that happen? What are you feeling when you start giving that kind of approach? And what other kinds of approaches? How might you be able to mitigate that in order to be able to be more effective in how you deliver whatever feedback is or how you conduct your job?
Understood, Ken. So when you think about coaching, when you think about, personal development, when you think about executives growing, do you feel like those similar problems also manifest from a personal finance perspective, where that lack of clarity in terms of how people show up at work
Yeah.
also impacts how they show up with their money?
Yeah, I think that's a great parallel, Mustafa, because you mentioned my trust model, and trust, as you mentioned, is an acronym. It stands for transparency, results, understanding, simplicity, and teams. And I use that in one way with my job seeking clients, and I use it another way with my executive coaching clients. But from a finance point of view, the transparency to me could be, you need to really be very open and honest with yourself. What can you bring to the table? Sometimes, when I'm talking with my financial planner, we talk about what kind of income I'm going to have. And I need to be transparent with myself. I need to say, you know what, I'm not making $1 million this year from clients, but I need to be realistic and transparent and fair with myself. The results I want to achieve with finance, you need to know, what is it you want to do? Are you looking for long term growth? Are you looking for something shorter term? Are you looking for investments in real estate that you might hold on to for a while, or whatever questions you might have? Understanding from a financial point of view, understand where you are today and where you want to be tomorrow and where you want to be 10 years from now, because that's going to affect your financial plan. I do believe in simplicity. There's so much going on out there. If your plan can be simple and easy to understand, then it's easier to enact and to make sure it comes through. And then the teams is that I don't think anybody could do things alone these days. We need experts like you to help guide people in their growing their finances. So, having a team of people that can help you get there is important also.
Ken, I appreciate that. Trust sounds like a very simple word. It's a very complex definition. It's a very complex to put into action. And now you've added an
Mhm.
acronym for us to really reflect on and unpack, making it a bit more, complex. I want to pause for a second, Ken, and talk directly to the listener. If you're listening to this conversation, if you're finding it useful, if you're finding it valuable, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, but most importantly, share this with a friend who can also benefit, because you don't often hear from people like Ken pulling back the layers on how top executives are growing and becoming more efficient. Because the reality is, Ken is not just helping just anybody, he's helping people who are at the top of their game get 1% better.
Mhm.
That's remarkable. And
Yeah.
Ken, when you talk about transparency, for example, when you talk about that executive who maybe is leading a team, help us understand one story, if you don't mind sharing, where transparency was the issue, and that individual who is very good at what he does or she does
Hmm.
didn't know what they didn't know, and they didn't realize that they were lacking that transparency, and that was negatively impacting the performance of the team and the performance of the company.
Yeah, and that's a very common thing to happen. I think a lot of times leaders think that they need to be the all-knowing. They need to be they can't have any weaknesses. They've got to have all the answers, and that's impossible, especially today. There's just so much out there. So a typical client of mine, this person was he was having an issue with how he would market this product. The product had gotten off to a good launch, but it was kind of stagnant for a little bit. So he was banging his head against the wall thinking, what am I, how can we jumpstart this product? And so I said to him, well, why are you trying to do this alone? He said, well, my team looks to me for leadership. They look to me for strength. I can't show them that I don't know what to do next. That wouldn't work. And I thought, and I spoke to him about actually the value of being vulnerable. And when your team sees you say, hey, I need help, I need your help, let's get together collectively, let's come up with some ideas, and let's put together a plan to move the product forward. When that happens, first of all, you get a lot more ownership. People are feeling like, oh, they really want to know what I have to say. Secondly, once the plan is made, there's so much more buy in because the people themselves help develop that plan. And the result in this particular case was he did start to see the product begin to pick up some more momentum along the way. And he definitely, I think it changed his view of what a leader should be or could be. And that is not someone who has to have all the answers, but someone who knows how to bring people together to get the answers.
That's a very powerful example, Ken. And I want to unpack it. I want to dive a little bit deeper. And if at any point it feels like I'm pushing back, I'm not. I'm just genuinely curious. It felt like, Ken, that you came from like a sales and marketing background
Mm-hmm.
from the pharmaceutical industry. In theory, I have a very strong sales background in real estate. And in theory, real estate, especially sales and real estate, attracts a certain type of person, not me. And that person would never really show any weakness or any, let's say, any challenges. It would always be like, now is the best time to invest. The only better time to invest was yesterday. So you should be investing. Right, Ken? So help me understand, from your perspective, as you have talked to many different leaders and you've helped mold them, I want to unpack that mentality. I don't know if you come across that mentality. And I want to understand, at what point is that transparency maybe like a dollar short or a day late, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense?
Yeah, I think that there certainly are times when you do need to keep your cards close to the vest. Certainly with proprietary information, certainly if there's an opportunity that you don't want to get out to other people, you want to make sure you take advantage of it. There are going to be times like that. So I guess if you overshare in those times and you miss opportunities because of that, that would definitely be a problem. But I do think transparency does show people, like other examples of transparency is when a leader makes a mistake and is able to admit it to his team. I thought we needed to do this. We tried it. It didn't work. We need to regroup and come somewhere else. To me, that's being transparent. That's showing people vulnerability, showing people that, you know what, I tried something, it failed, and that's okay because now you could try something and fail. And no, I'm not going to beat you up about it as long as it was well thought out and you did your due diligence. But I think that transparency allows other people to be innovative, to take initiative. So how you use it is definitely important, Mustafa. You're right.
I love that, Ken. Ken, I wanted to kind of unpack something from your perspective. In theory, the people you work with are very good at what they do. In theory, they probably don't have free time, so to speak. How does one who's very good at what they do realize they have blind spots, realize that they might need a coach, and realize maybe that you or somebody like you would be the right fit for them?
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly, first of all, I think some of the biggest leaders of the biggest companies in the world have coaches. So I think there's something to be said for that alone. But I think, all of us, the world changes so fast. And I think we all need to keep continuously learn and grow in order to keep up with things. So I think a coach, like I typically work with my clients, we meet twice a month 45 minutes to an hour. And then they have access to me anytime if something comes up between sessions. I would make myself available to talk. But it gives them a chance to sit back because mostly, you get in the morning, you got your 200 emails to answer, you have 10 meetings to go to, and you don't have time to sit back and really breathe and think what's going on. So I think the smart leaders know that it's of value to have an objective person to talk to kind of get your thoughts together and make sure you're continuing to move the business in the right direction.
I love that answer, Ken, because you touched on three things that I feel like people don't talk about, or at least maybe it doesn't show up on my news feed. The first thing you mentioned is everybody has coaches. I don't think that that's conventional wisdom. I don't think that people realize that everybody has a coach. If you
Mhm.
hear the word coach, I think you're thinking of a sports player having a coach, not the type of coach that we're talking about, which maybe is the same thing. Maybe it's different, depends on your perspective. The next thing that you mentioned is you always need to learn. And I'm laying these out so that we can dive deeper. The next thing that you mentioned was that you always need to learn. And this comes up depending on the type of content you interact with on social media. Most people interact with like cars and like girls and like houses, not like business growth. And the third one is no time to think. And the reason why I added that third one is I think that that might be the most important. But I want to
Hmm.
go, one by one. The first one being everybody has coaches. Obviously, you're an executive coach. Mentioned you started at J&J. You mentioned that you were there for 25 years. I was at Janssen towards the end of my pharmaceutical
Hmm.
career, which is the drug development arm of J&J.
Sure.
So, Ken, talk to me. When you started at Janssen, or sorry, when you started at J&J, was there the idea of coaches, coaching available, etc.? At what point did you become aware of the world of executive coaching?
Well, I wouldn't say it was being aware of executive coaching at the time, but it was the value of coaching. I started out as a sales rep, carrying a bag, going in, calling on doctors. And a big part of the pharmaceutical sales world is that you have a district manager that goes out in the field with each rep a couple times a month, and they go through the whole day and they make calls. And that the role of that manager is to observe the rep giving the presentation or interacting with the doctors and the office staff, and then giving feedback to them. Because a lot of times you don't realize what you're doing. You don't know how you sound when you're delivering something. So having another party being able to observe that really makes a big difference. I remember one of the first times I went out with my manager, he said, you say a lot when you're talking. So I wasn't aware of that. A lot of people do that. It's a habit. That's a small example, but having someone observe what you do and then be able to tell you objectively. Now, the really hard part, and this is where it's similar for my executive coaching, is to not jump in and make the call for that rep, not to tell them, here's what you have to do. It's helping them to see what they need to do because that they're going to get more buy-in to and more likely they'll do it. So definitely there are similarities there.
So you're mentioning towards the end of the answer, Ken, that you can't really solve people's problems for them. And the
Hmm.
subtext is that solving people's problems for them, while beneficial in the short term, is actually very harmful in the long term. I
Hmm.
wanted to tie that into personal finance. I wanted to understand from your perspective. I don't know, Ken, you have kids, correct?
Yes. Hmm.
How many
Older, but yeah.
kids? How
I
many
have
kids do you have?
three kids and three grandchildren with one on the way.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So your kids are a bit older, I assume, as well. For you, do you feel like you've had to kind of manage their finances for them, or was it more of a situation where you had to kind of show them the ropes and they had to kind of figure it out by themselves and maybe stumble a couple times, but ultimately, pick themselves up again?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, we certainly have helped our kids along the way. We're very fortunate to be able to do that, and our kids are fortunate that we're able to do that. But really, it's been, we've given them some high level guidance about the importance of saving, having a nest egg, having emergency funds, and to manage their money so if they want to do things, they have that money to do it. We wouldn't, let's say for example they've been out spending all their money doing all kinds of things and then say, oh, I want to go on vacation, I don't have money, mom and dad, can you give me money? Well, no, that's where one lesson comes in. Maybe you should have thought about that before you went out to dinner 5 times a week for the last month. So it's more of guidance to them too, and a lot of it, like with a lot of things in life, is you learn by experience. Sometimes it's painful, but I will tell you a great lesson that they did get, which was a tough one, was when I got laid off. Because I was 52 years old at the time. Two of those kids were in college, one was in high school. And I was, what am I going to do? I felt my responsibility as a parent was to help pay for their education, like I was fortunate my parents did. At J&J, if you hit 55, that's the magic number. You get full pension, full benefits. But I was 52. I didn't get there. I got fortunate I did get some pension. But what I was able to talk to my kids about was the money I'd put away while I was working, whether it was investing in my 401k plan. We didn't do a lot of real estate investments, as I'm uh, looking back on thinking probably could have or should have. Um, but having that money was definitely peace of mind because, back in the 80s, there was a recession and people were laid off. The housing bubble burst, people were laid off. 9/11, people were laid off. the pandemic, people were laid off. AI is causing people, and in the future, who knows what's going to be there. So finding a stable financial investment and financial plan, I think is very important.
I can't emphasize that enough. So I really appreciate the way you worded it, Ken. And if you want to talk real estate, we can talk about that afterwards. But I guess for your kids, that must have been very educational, in a tough way to say, hey, we're going to college to get a good job, but just because we get a good job does not mean that that good job is actually as stable as it sounds and as it appears.
Mhm.
Would you say that that's a fair assessment, or not really?
I think it's a very fair assessment. I mean, most of my clients on the career transition side, they didn't see it coming. Like all of a sudden, either their company got bought out, AI got introduced, and jobs got eliminated. So I always say to people, you've got to plan for whatever comes next because we don't know what it is. Like I said, I mean, now too, with the tariffs and inflation, who saw that coming? Right? They're just things that will always happen. So I think having multiple streams of income today could be very helpful. So if you have a full time job, having some investments that are working for you as well, I think is very important.
I agree with you when you say multiple streams of income. Ken, we mentioned two other points that I want to dive into. We mentioned the idea that you always need to learn, and we mentioned the idea that you need time to think. I
Mm-hmm.
want to dive into this idea of you always need to learn. How does it manifest, in your opinion, when you're working with executive leaders? Are they typically people with bachelors, with masters, with MBAs? Like, what education were you typically seeing towards the tail end of your career professionally versus when you actually actively started coaching in your business?
Mm-hmm.
And how do people actually implement that idea of always learning outside of maybe the traditional educational system?
Yeah, well, there are different ways that people need to learn, and I started out with my coaching. I was probably doing more new managers to mid level managers, and now I'm doing probably mid level managers up to CEOs. Although I still do new managers as well. And I think learning though, sometimes people think, oh, I've got to go back to school and get a degree or a certificate, and that's learning, and it is. But it doesn't always have to be that hard. There's networking. You learn through networking, connecting with people who are maybe in similar roles to you, but maybe in completely different role. And you're learning about different ways that they get business done and how they approach people in different ways. There are associations through LinkedIn. They have all kinds of online programming you could do that and get certifications for. So learning can come in different ways. In formal education by going back to school, it's in the people you interact with, the people you surround yourself with. It's in the way you spend your time, whether it's with associations or networks. And it's certainly publications and just reading and staying up to date on the latest trends. There are just a number of different ways that people need to stay up to speed and be ahead of the curve.
From your perspective, Ken, when people are learning, is the intention to learn to get a new job? Is the intention to learn to help in their personal development? Help me understand and help the listener understand why these people are investing their precious little time, little free time that they have in learning.
Yeah, I think there's probably a number of different reasons for it. I personally don't focus as much on the end result as what it takes to get there. Because if you only focus on the end result, you might get it, but then what? But if you put together the processes, if you learn the things you need to learn, then you could transfer that elsewhere. It'll help you to grow, continue to grow personally, but it also gives you more business opportunities because you're just more aware and you've learned more different things or met different people that'll help you get ahead with your life.
So, Ken, with respect to learning, you had also mentioned the different challenges that have come up in the marketplace over the last 20 years or so. You mentioned the dot-com bubble, you mentioned 9/11, you mentioned the pandemic, and now AI, and all of these different disruptions that ultimately keep employees a bit afraid that they might lose their jobs. There's a lot of that today with help me understand how learning impacts your ability to stay relevant in the marketplace, because there's always going to be some threat to your job stability, if I understand things correctly.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think AI is one of those things now, everybody talks about AI. I'm not sure that is a full understanding of it yet, but you got to have some understanding of AI to compete today. And I think that what it shows too is that you're open. When you're continually learning, first of all, obviously from a technical point of view, you're going to stay on the cutting edge. But it's also showing that you're open. You're open to ideas. You're open to things that you're not necessarily comfortable with or familiar with. And so that opens up a lot of possibilities. It opens up investment possibilities that you maybe are willing to look at that someone who's kind of closed minded and stuck in their ways wouldn't look at. You're open to business opportunities, job opportunities. And it also demonstrates, if you're going down the employer route, that you can learn and you can grow. And no matter what's after AI, you'll be able to adapt to that. So I think learning gives you a lot of flexibility for what you want to do in the future.
As a C-suite executive or somebody who's maybe a director, managing director, etc., how do you accurately reflect your growth mentality on your resume when you're applying for new jobs? Because you did mention you do coaching to help people with new jobs,
Mm-hmm.
right? I can't
Yeah.
imagine you're just writing I'm flexible or I have a growth mentality. Everybody has a growth mentality, allegedly,
Right.
right? So how do you actually position yourself strategically to get that next job if you're finding yourself out of work or if you're finding yourself just in need of a new opportunity?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first place to start really is networking. It's talking to people, whether it's in the same field, if that's the way you want to go, or expanding your network. And networking is not about asking for a job, it's just about learning and growing and understanding different people. And it's how you connect to where they'll say, hey, I don't have anything for you, but I know someone you need to talk to. So I think that you would start with networking. But then in your resume and your LinkedIn profile, you need to tell that story. And it can't be a story where it could be anybody, a generic story. I often, with my clients, I'll go through it and I'll say, by each statement, let's start with the summary and then look at each role you have and each bullet point that you talk about what you did in that job. Is that unique to you, or could anybody say that? Are you saying just I'm responsible for leading a group of 50 people in a $1.2 billion business? Okay, you're responsible for that, but I don't know how well you did it or whether you did it at all. But if you start telling me that you identified a situation, you took these action steps, and these were the results that you delivered, all of a sudden that's yours. Nobody could take that away from you. So the key in differentiating yourself is to tell really good stories about things you've done and the results you've delivered.
So does that all come down to like STAR? Is that kind
Stars.
of how you look at it, or is there a different, acronym that you would think of?
Yeah, well, I guess I do like STAR, and I actually call it STARS. And for your listeners who don't know what that is, it's a process to interview questions. It's situation, task, action, results. And the last S is that I introduce is so what? So why am I telling you that? Because you could tell me these great stories, but I need to know how that relates to me. How is that going to help me as an interviewer or a hiring manager? When I'm writing a resume, I kind of use SARS. I take the T out, and it's just describe the situation, what actions did you take, and what results did you deliver. And you need to do that in a very clear and concise way.
And when you're adding that last S, so what, is the intention to future pace to say when you hire me, this is what I will bring to the company? Or is the intention
Mhm.
something different? That way they're already subconsciously imagining you as part of their team.
Yes, exactly. It gives you the opportunity to paint the picture of you in that role for that hiring manager. I think the whole thing, in whether it's interviewing for a new job or maybe it's talk to someone about investing in real estate as well, is to allow them to see what it would be like to work with you. Here's what you get if you work with me, and here are the outcomes you could expect in working with me. And if you could communicate that clearly, you're going to have a good where it will lead to a beneficial relationship for both parties.
I love that, Ken. Very eloquently stated. The last thing that you mentioned of the three that I outlined was no time to think. To
Mm.
me, respectfully, this was the most important one. But I don't think people realize that they're in a rat race. I don't people think people realize that they're busy and they're too busy to think, and not being able to think is actually costing them more from a growth perspective. That's
Mm-hmm.
slowing down and getting less work done. So I want to really understand from your perspective, because you coach executives who are also very good at what they do, how powerful is this idea of not having the time to think?
Yeah. Well, I think it's incredibly powerful to long-term success. I mean, if you go in every day and you put your head down and all you do is answer emails and put out fires, you're not building anything. You're not adapting or seeing what's coming down the road and making any strategic decisions to change direction or alter your approach. And you have to find time during the day. I recommend to all executives that you block off time during the day just for you. The first block I recommend is first thing in the morning before you open up email, before I don't know, Mustafa, about you. Have you ever gotten an email that says, I know you're really busy, so let me take a few things off your plate? Not happening, right? So once you open email, you're gone for the day. So take that first hour of the day for yourself. Again, a lot of leaders, the biggest leaders in the world, in the country, take time to meditate. They take time just to think, to clear their heads and relax and get themselves ready for the day. They don't just jump right into work. So, and then I would also suggest maybe at the end of the day, taking an hour or a half hour to say, okay, what did I accomplish today? What do I need to do tomorrow? So when you do start the next day, you're already on your way. So otherwise, you're just shooting from the hip and hoping that email takes you where you want to be.
I get those emails. It's like, Mustafa, I know you're extremely busy, but this is the most important thing that you need to deal with.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, remind me in an hour and I'll take care of it then. So talk to me, Ken, because I do believe in time blocking. I typically time block like 4 hours of my day in the morning, typically for like deep work, all the tasks that I don't want to do, I do first in my
Mm-hmm.
day. But help me understand when you talk about time blocking in the context of making time to think. The idea is you're doing nothing except just thinking, right? So ultimately, from your perspective, when you're coaching people through this, is it, hey, this is how you do it? You should have, three objectives that you're thinking about, or is it just let your mind go wild and, think about whatever you're going to think about, and it will
Mm-hmm.
ultimately help you reach your end goal, whatever that is. How do you approach this
Yeah.
concept?
Yeah, I do think it needs to be more pointed than just sit around and kind of let's see what happens. There might be an element of that, right? And that comes out as meditation, right? Just clearing your head and trying to get
Because some people just say
yourself where
like
you
just
want.
brain dump, like just like put everything on paper, just let your mind go wild and write everything down and then clean
Yeah.
it up later. But you're saying, hey, it does need to be a bit more structured. So what does that structure look like from your perspective?
Yeah, as you're asking the question, I was thinking about, personally, when I go out, like if I go out for a walk, just go for exercise or just to get some fresh air, I find I do my best thinking. The phone's not ringing, the computer's not in front of me. I'm thinking about this proposal I want to do, and oh, I'm going to present it this way or that way. I'm thinking about a client that I want to work with or how I might want to work with them. So, kind of getting away from all the physical parts of work allows your mind to open up. And then I am thinking about the specific things I need to get done. But my mind is much less cluttered and ideas seem to flow a lot better. So, I think it's a combination. Sometimes it is just space out, zone out, and just clear your head, meditate, whatever you want to call it. And then a good part of that should be just, focused on things you need to get done and how you might want to approach them.
I've been loving the conversation, Ken. The last, maybe the second last question that I have for you today, Ken. When you're working with executives, do you ever reach a point in the conversation where you're saying, like, listen, you have a lot of personal stuff going on, deal with your personal life, clean that up, and then you will
Mm-hmm.
show up better at work? Or, hey, you have a lot of personal finance things going on. Maybe you're late on your taxes, you're going through bankruptcy, you're getting evicted, your house is getting repossessed, your car is getting
Mm-hmm.
repossessed, whatever it is. Like, you have a lot of, or maybe your kids are going through challenges and it's impacting you. You have a lot of, let's say, with love and respect, personal drama that's
Mm-hmm.
negatively impacting your ability to show up at work. Has that ever come up or not really?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And I also, there are times I do have to remind my clients, I'm not a therapist. I can't help you with those things. I've gone to therapy, so maybe I can from that perspective, but I am not a therapist. But it is maybe that perspective of having gone through it myself too, that I let people know. Yeah, you can't separate the two completely. I mean, your life, your personal life, and your work life, they impact each other. So there have been times where I have suggested therapy for some clients because it does get in the way. If you have some significant personal issues, it does get in the way. If finance is one of your issues, then yeah, talking to people like yourself and figuring out, getting a plan in place at least gives you the peace of mind that will allow you to do the other things you need to do with your life.
When you talk to people in this context, are they kind of taken aback when you say, "Hey, you need to go for therapy," or "Hey, you need to talk to a financial planner," which I'm not. I would be more like a financial coach, real estate expert, etc. But I do help people with those types of things. Are people kind of taken aback, Ken, or are they more like appreciative, like, "Hey, this person really gets me and understands what I'm going through"?
Yeah, well, I think I've never had anybody that's been taken aback by it because I think I'm a pretty authentic guy. I mean, I just told you and your audience of thousands of people that I've gone to therapy. So I think when people, and that's a good part of leadership, I think too, is when people see you as vulnerable, they see you as a regular person. It's easier to connect with them and easier to talk with them. So when I do it, they know it's coming from my heart, coming from a good place, and it's not something that they should be ashamed of, or they're certainly not the first person who would go through it. Typically, people are understanding.
I appreciate that, Ken. I just have maybe one question, one follow-up question on this topic. Why use the word vulnerable instead of authentic? Like for you,
Hmm.
my understanding is, you have that sales and marketing background. To me, it just bleeds of like authenticity, which is
Mm-hmm.
like positive, strong positioning, versus
Mm-hmm.
maybe vulnerability, which can, to me, it's neutral, but maybe to somebody else, it might be like weaker positioning versus authenticity. So I'm curious
Yeah.
to hear, your perspective on the
Hmm.
two. And
No, I think it's a great question. I appreciate the challenge on that. I think that's what I do. I think it's great. I mean, why have a conversation if we're not going to challenge each other, right? I actually think authenticity and vulnerability are almost similar, are synonymous with each other. I think um, it's interesting because a lot of times when people, my clients describe me, or if I do talks, they say they describe me as authentic, which I appreciate that. But I think being vulnerable is a way to demonstrate your authenticity. If I'm coming across to you like I'm perfect, I have no issues, you need to be more like me, it's kind of hard to buy into that. But I think, and I think, by the way, being too vulnerable is a problem also. If I'm weak, I don't know anything, I don't know, that's
in
not a
our
person
in
you
our
want to talk
culture, that's just humble.
to. Right.
And then we found out the guy's a multimillionaire. We're like,
That's
why wasn't he
right.
talking?
Yeah. Yes. But I think, showing some vulnerability, showing some sign of humanity that makes people more willing to show their side and be more authentic themselves.
Beautiful, Ken. I've really enjoyed our whole conversation. I'm sure the audience has as well. If somebody's listening to this episode and they wanted to learn more about you, they want to learn more about the coaching you provide, what is the best way for them to contact you?
Okay, well, there are a couple of ways. One, I'd love if someone wants to reach out to me directly at ken@shercoaching.com. I'd love to hear from you. And I also have a guide, by the way. It's a small guide on the trust success model, which I'd be happy to share with anyone. If they send an email to ken@shercoaching.com, I'll be glad to share that with them. And then certainly on LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, in my contact information is my calendar link, and you could set up time with me to talk. Give a 30-minute complimentary session. I'd be happy to help you in any way I can. No pressure. If you want to talk about working together, great. If not, it'd just be nice to meet some of your audience. And then just the last thing, my website is surecoaching.com. The
Awesome.
three ways to get
So
in touch with me.
what we'll do is we'll include all those links in the show notes. Once again, Ken, this has been a practical reminder that leadership is not just about knowing the work. It's not just about answering those emails every day and getting stuck in working in the business. It's about building trust, creating clarity, and helping people perform at their best. For anyone listening, the takeaway is simple: stronger relationships and higher standards are not the opposite. The best leaders learn how to do both. And if they're not sure how, we've linked the information to reach out to Ken so you can actually get more efficient, grow 1%. And that's the point of MyFinJourney, is really to help you on your financial journey and to really understand that there's many aspects of life that are reflected in your financial growth. If this episode has helped, consider subscribing, liking the episode, but most importantly, consider sharing it with a friend who is also trying to grow. Until next time, thanks, guys.